Good evening, Barbados. This is one of the toughest conversations I've had to have with this country since I became Minister responsible for education, technological, and vocational training. And it is because the people in this country whom this ministry is meant to serve have felt hurt. And before I even attempt to offer you an explanation or the background of this most serious matter that has taken place this week, I want to state first that the Ministry of Education, Technological, and Vocational Training, we accept our responsibility for the mistakes that have been made in the execution of the pretest, which, because it also had survey questions, changed it from being a pretest to a different kind of data collection instrument. This was even after our ministry had objected to those survey questions, the pretest questions we had agreed to, but the survey questions were not agreed to by this ministry. But I know that this ministry must take responsibility for not having checked back well enough to make sure that what we asked to be removed was actually removed. And because I am the minister with responsibility for this ministry, the buck stops with me. And I therefore accept responsibility on behalf of the ministry that I lead for this unfortunate situation. And notwithstanding the apologies that have already been offered by our technical team, our administrative team, and by our international development partner, the Inter-American Development Bank, despite those apologies, I want to again sincerely offer my apologies to the students, to the parents, to the teachers, to the principals, and to all who have been impacted negatively. The first time that I became aware that there was this survey that had been offered in schools and that this survey had inappropriate questions that were considered quite invasive. First time I learned about that, it was on Tuesday. I was in Parliament and the Chief Education Officer called me and I left Parliament to take her call. And she informed me of what she had been reported to her at the time. And given, of course, that surveys are normally done at the technical level by persons who are working on specific projects, I then asked the chief to continue the investigation that she told me she had begun, to find out what exactly happened that had brought us to this. I took this matter seriously, Barbados, because I too am not just a minister, I am a mother too. I am a parent. I took this seriously. And I had the choice to either rush to the press or rush to understand exactly what happened and rush to action. I chose, instead of rushing to the press, to rush to action. I took the time to listen to the very valid concerns of parents and other Barbadians. I felt the fury and I felt your outrage and I understand it. I took the time to meet with my team here at the Ministry of Education to fully understand exactly what transpired step by step to have caused this situation to get to the point that it did. I have taken the time to meet on several occasions with our international development partner, the Inter-American Development Bank. And I have taken the time to listen and to appreciate the meaningful contributions that have been made by Barbadians on social media, in the mass media, and in every different forum. I have taken the time to hear the constructive contributions that have been made about the broader conversations that have to happen in this country as it relates to data collection, as it relates to who goes into our school and how, as it relates to what is appropriate and inappropriate, understanding that Barbados has a sociocultural context. The kind of people we are as Barbadians will not necessarily lend itself at all times to things that will work elsewhere. I have taken the time to do all of this because I recognize that the ministry apologizing is not enough. That the Inter-American Development Bank apologizing is not enough. That even though the Prime Minister of Barbados condemned the questions in her presentation yesterday, that too is not enough. This situation calls for clear action that will address not just some of the immediate hurt that has happened, but that will also put this ministry on a footing to be able to do better going forward. So after listening and appreciating the perspectives, trying on the perspectives of a number of stakeholders in education as well as the general public, I have made certain decisions in consultation with our Prime Minister. Number one, no further survey type questions will be administered in any school until the data collection and ethics policy has been developed and has been vetted. Email to this effect has already been sent to the principals of our various schools, and I want you to know that the data collection instrument, which had the offending questions, was stopped the very Tuesday when the chief and I discovered that these surveys were being done. They were stopped the very same day. I have been advised that all instruments that were completed by students has now been collected and is stored safely in a vault on the premises controlled by government. Consultants involved in the design and the data collection aspect of the project at various levels will no longer be associated with this project. In no uncertain terms, in our meetings yesterday with the IDB, we made it clear that this ministry would no longer be working with the consultants that were hired and had responsibility for this evaluation. A committee that is made up of various stakeholders, parent, student, principal, teachers, teachers' unions, legal advisor, ministry officials, is going to be charged with developing the data collection and ethics policy, and I've asked for that to be done with urgency. And once this policy is completed, it will be vetted by an ethics committee. You would have heard the Prime Minister mention that ethics committee yesterday when she spoke. The Ministry of Education, we recognize, and we have heard the parents who have said that they and their children have been negatively impacted mentally by this. And if there are any persons out there who believe that this has affected them, know that the Inter-American Development Bank has agreed to work with the Ministry of Education to make sure that mental health support is provided. And so we have now in the ministry set up a hotline, 535-0707, that will begin on Monday, October 10th. It will be open from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. And it will be open from October 10th until November 10th initially, then we will review after that period. And we invite parents and students who've been impacted to kindly use that hotline if you think you will need mental health support. Students may also go to their guidance counselors in their respective schools. Officers within this ministry who worked at the ground level with this project have already started to review the lessons learned. And I have directed the Chief Education Officer to pull together officials and technical people of this ministry and start a comprehensive look at our policies. Where are there gaps? Where are there policies that need to be strengthened to ensure that situations like this become a thing of our past? It is important that this ministry continue to develop its capacity, to develop policies, and to implement those policies along with the processes and procedures that will ensure that we keep our children safe and that indeed this ministry is operating according to best practice in every different endeavor. Now, I personally, as well as the ministry, we are in full support of the publishing of the data collection instrument that was used. I have been told by a technical officer who has done the check-in that there is a document not printed by this ministry, but that is in the public domain in the newspaper of today. And that document, except for its formatting, certainly in terms of its specific content, seems to resemble very closely the instrument that was administered. And while I support fully the publication of that instrument, and the ministry does, our entire team, we were advised that because that instrument does not belong to the ministry, we did not design it, we did not develop it, we did not implement it, we had no responsibility for it. That because we did not own the rights to that instrument, we could not go ahead and publish it. Now, I wish to be clear, very clear, that code.org was in no way, form or fashion involved in the offending, developing, designing, putting in place, or administering the offending questions on that data collection instrument. They were not responsible for the evaluation process of which those questions would have been a part. The sole role of Code.org, which is the project that was being implemented in First Forms, to which people have associated this situation. Code.org was solely responsible for providing content and for implementing the curriculum for computer science, for the computer science program, with a focus also on training and ongoing professional development for teachers. And I suggest we not be distracted by what has happened with that data collection instrument that was part of the evaluation process that was handled by the IDB. And I ask that people disassociate code.org from anything that has happened in this particular situation. I thought that I might share a little bit of the benefits of the project of code.org. But this is not the time, because this is not about the program. This is about the people of this country, about the children, about the parents who have been negatively impacted by this. In closing, I want to reiterate our apology, my apology, this ministry's apology for the unfortunate situation that emerged and that has hurt, caused so many parents and children to feel hurt. And while I do not expect that any apology from whomever can be enough, I sincerely trust that the specific actions that we have now set in motion will help us to manage our own emotions and our own anxiety around this, and will go the distance. I thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We now open the floor for questions.
Check. Good evening, Minister, panel. Just a couple of questions I have. I just stepped outside a bit just to give a report, but I'm not too sure if you had answered the question already, but just for my benefit, why was the IDAB doing the survey or the pretest in the first place? How did they come about getting to do this test?
There are three collaborators on this project. There's code.org, who had responsibility only for content and curriculum delivery and the training and the professional development of teachers. They had nothing to do with this particular data collection instrument. A second collaborator was the Inter-American Development Bank, whose role was to fund the project and also to do the evaluation of the project. This data collection instrument was a part of that evaluation process. They hired the consultant and they were responsible for that implementation. And then, of course, the third collaborator would have been the ministry, whose responsibility it was to be able to facilitate the implementation of the program in our schools.
Can you explain why was it called the computer science test?
Right. I'm going to ask the chief to respond to that.
It was called a pretest because there were items on the test in reading, in mathematics or logic, to determine the competencies of the children. The original pretest, as it was shown to this ministry, also had survey type questions, the ones that you've seen circulating in the newspaper. And this ministry was against the inclusion of those types of items in the pretest.
Good evening, Minister Barry Allen from the Nation newspaper. I have two questions for you, Minister. During your presentation earlier, you said you felt the pain and the outrage of parents, and you said you understand that the buck stops at you. The question I have to ask is, having heard that pain, having heard that outrage, and no apologizing, did you at any stage contemplate resigning from the Cabinet of Barbados over this unfortunate situation? That's the first question. Go ahead.
I never anticipated, I never thought to resign. What often happens is that partners enter into agreements to implement projects at all times. There are times when there's trust between partners, that if one partner says X should be done and the partner has responsibility for doing X, we expect that they will follow through. What happened here, I believe, not I believe, I know, was that an error was made where the removal of questions was not done, and you would have seen that in the press release done by the Inter-American Development Bank. And our officers have also said that they ought to have been more diligent in checking to make sure that what they trusted was real. These matters are normally handled at a technical level. I do not see forms or surveys or questionnaires that go out for every single project that exists within our school system. It's just impossible. There's so many. And so I never thought that it would have been necessary for me to resign. I thought it would have been necessary for us as a ministry to review the situation and to put what is necessary to be put in place in order for us to move forward and continue to do better.
Also, Minister, there have been claims that, I heard you mention that you didn't want to rush to action.
No, I said I didn't want to rush the press.
Okay, rush to the press.
I
That you
preferred
rushed to action, yes.
more so.
Right. There have been claims and by both parents and members of the public that you threw the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Archer, under the bus by not being the first person, the head of the policymakers in Barbados, to come forward and apologize. How would you respond to those parents who believe that way?
I believe they're misinformed in that regard. The first time the chief spoke publicly on that matter was on Thursday when I was in cabinet. And we did have discussions about who was going to go to the public at this time. The decision was made that the chief would go at this time because it was normally a project implemented at the technical level where these situations would be handled. And so we discussed this and agreed that the chief would go. And so it was no effort on my part to throw the chief under the bus, as some are suggesting. Everyone will have their own speculation and some will have their own agenda. But the persons who are here at this table know what happened, and I am telling you that that is an untruth.
My final question, just how challenging do you think, though, will it be to mend the wound that has been formed here with the parents and teachers of Barbados?
I think the hurt is real. The hurt is real. And I don't think that we can gloss over it. I don't think there's any quick fix. I think that this ministry is going to have to earn its way back into the trust of the people. There's no shortcut to it.
Also, how are you going to earn that trust, ma'am?
Well, we have to deliver on what we say. All of those points that I laid out in terms of action, we need to follow through on all of them. And the entire team has to be a part of making sure that we follow through. It means that when we follow through on them, we need to let the parents know what we have done, let the public know what we have done in following through on each of those areas that we have said. And then we need to give it time, and we need to continue to walk the talk.
Hi, good evening. Shamar Black from Barbados today, and good evening to the panel. Just one question from me. You mentioned that you are intending to create an ethics committee to go over future surveys, tests, so on. But as far as I'm aware, there currently exists as protocol on the island governing surveys, tests, whether it be a secondary school, tertiary level, so on and so forth. Are you saying that the current protocols that are in place are inadequate, or if not, what do you plan to do about it?
There are several protocols that have been in place. And I think that sometimes it is whether the protocol itself was accurate, was adequate, and sometimes it's whether it was followed. And so I think that we need to consider both aspects of the protocols, that some that are in place that need to have been strengthened and some that need to have been followed. And I'll ask the chief to wade in if there's anything further she wishes to add.
We followed the protocols as set out. I must say that with this IDB project, it was also conducted in Belize and in other parts of the Caribbean. When we met with the consultants and with persons from the IDB, we thoroughly discussed it, and we realized that some parts of the instrument were not contextual, and as a result, we spoke out against that. As I said before, it was supposed to be a test where you would try to understand the children's competencies with regard to reading and mathematical logic and so on, but it did not turn out to be that.
Harry, getting from Loop News, I have a few questions. The first question I have is, many parents and guardians want the instrument destroyed. They don't want it kept safely, they don't want it kept in any format because students were asked to give their names. Can this be done instead of securely keeping them?
The reason why we have securely kept them is because we have asked advice as to what is the appropriate way for us to destroy these instruments.
So destruction is the ultimate goal.
That is what I would like to see. However, we have to take advice as to the best way to go about.
Okay. Secondly, you would have said that we are no longer going to be working with these consultants. Are they going to be identified or named for persons to know how to avoid these persons?
I don't think it is a matter of wanting to avoid persons. We are not here to be the police of consultants out there. And I did not, this ministry did not hire the consultants. They were not our consultants. And so the conversation we had with our partner was that this ministry does not wish to be associated. Now, what else might happen with those consultants, that is not for us. We have stated the ministry's position, but that does not cast any aspersion on those consultants, and the responsibility for those consultants was the IDB, and they will have to determine what they do. However, Barbados has made it clear, not with this project.
Okay, understood. But I'm just saying with consultants, it's more like a freelance basis, so they could work for a different organization. I'm just saying that. The next question was, in terms of the policy that you're looking to put in place, is this going to impact teachers and university students as well? Reason I'm asking this is a lot of teachers come into the classroom and they're doing the PED, and they bring their questionnaires for their thesis and they distribute them in class. Is this going to be impacting the UE students and teachers? Are you going to be more stringent on this?
As I've said, there is a team that has been put together to come up with the policy. I cannot preempt, I cannot presume what that committee will come up with. I cannot advise myself. I am not an expert in that area, and that's why we have asked for that committee to be set up. So, ma'am, I cannot tell you what will be the outcome of the policy. I can tell you that we will ensure that it gets developed and implemented.
Hey, good evening. Sorry, one more question. You would have said that you would have outlined these questions before to the IDB and to the consultants to be taken out. And obviously, that did not occur. Has any similar situation happened in the past with the ministry in terms of you all outlining any questions that you all felt that would not be appropriate to students? And if so, has the ministry now taken it on itself to go back to previous surveys, previous tests, to make sure that the questions that should not have been there have actually been taken out and not instead being kept in?
Right now, the focus is on the IDB, but I am sure that I will meet with my team and we will review what has happened in the past. What happened here recently with regard to the questions being left in has opened our eyes to the possibilities, the things that possibly could have happened in the past. And as the minister said, we are now looking to move forward. So we're devising policies to determine that the data collection and the administration of instruments does not violate our children. And we would take all of those things into account.
Question, Minister. The ministry has said on more than one occasion that it requested that this quote-unquote offensive material be removed, and it wasn't. Has the ministry been given a professional reason as to why it was not removed, and what can you do about that?
The apology, we received an apology. We were told that the questions were inadvertently left in, that it may have been a case of miscommunication. And as a result, of course, the IDB accepted full responsibility because we not only voiced our concerns in meetings, but we placed those concerns in writing. So that is what occurred.
Minister, when this new ethics committee is established, is it going to work in conjunction with the ministry's research and planning unit, or will it work on the outside of that research and planning unit? We know the unit is generally responsible for a lot of the work that will be done to go forward to our children in terms of policy development and whatever we plan for it. But will it be working outside or in conjunction?
Part of the overall policy will include the ethics committee. And until that policy is fully developed and we see how all of the parts will relate to each other in a coherent way that makes sense for this ministry, until that is done, I will not be able to answer that. The intention, though, is that the ethics committee will have oversight. And that in itself says that there may very well be some differentiation. But as I said, let us have the entire policy developed, see how each piece fits together, but know that the ethics committee will have oversight of the instruments.
Minister, I'm not too sure if this question was answered, but this whole thing has brought about an issue of parental consent. Many parents would have expressed their concern about this whole process, and they felt that they were not consented on this whole thing, and there was a clear breach in the Data Protection Act. Just to give your response on those expressions from parents and generally Barbadians alike.
In terms of parental consent, and I can understand the parents' concern with regard to the kinds of questions that were asked on the questionnaire. But bear in mind, this was supposed to be a test. It wasn't supposed to be invasive. The questions were not supposed to make the children feel uncomfortable in any way, because they were not supposed to be on the paper. Those questions that were offensive were not supposed to be on the paper. The survey was not supposed to be on the paper. So given the fact that it was a test, to get an understanding of students' competencies before they really got into the implementation of the coding program, the parental consent was not considered at that time. Now, certainly, if we had agreed to having those kinds of questions on the test, that survey on the test, then we should have asked the parents their consent. But remember that the Ministry of Education in no way agreed to having those kinds of questions on the test.
And with regards to your question on the data protection, we have asked advice. I cannot advise myself. I am not a lawyer, and I would not want to advise the ministry. And so we have asked for the proper advice in that regard.
I know you said earlier that the code.org had disassociated themselves with this whole thing.
That is not what I said, sir.
Sorry.
I said they were never
So, but how
implicated
so the question
in
is-
that. So
how did
they
it
were
come up?
never a part of it. The code.org is the program that was being implemented in schools. But code.org had nothing to do with the evaluation. Nothing. That was done by our other partner.
So I was just wondering.
So they were never implicated.
I was just wondering how the name come about in the first place.
Because Code Caribbean is the program that is sponsored by the IDB, because this program is implemented in other parts of the Caribbean. The company that is implementing that is Code.org. And they are not in any way associated with this evaluation.
Minister, I know you would have brought us up to speed with the fact that you're reading online and that mental health assistance will be provided. The question I have to ask though is that in many cases with mental health, a lot of people that may be affected may not come forward and irreparable harm may have been done. Do you think that the ministry may have to, instead of asking parents or teachers who feel pressured or who feel affected to come forward, that you may actually have to go into the first forms to actually flesh out more of what harm has been done by this survey?
The responsibility we have here, and I hear what you're saying, not everyone is comfortable coming forward. We have put the facilities in place that should they choose to, it's available to them. And we can do our best in that regard. There are professionals that would be a part of that, and I hope we can make people feel sufficiently comfortable to know that if they do come forward, it is confidential. And if they do come forward, the support that they need will be provided. And that is the best that we can do. Make the facility available. Make sure that it is the right professionals are part of that experience for them. And I think that's the best we can do at this time. If there's any question of going into the schools to seek to tease out or bring out persons, I don't know that that is appropriate at this time for us. But if the chief or any of the other experts have another perspective, I would be very interested to hear it. But I would say our responsibility is to make sure that we have put a facility in place to give them the right kind of support with the right kind of professionals there to deliver quality service.
I just wanted to ask a question. Do we know how many schools it was distributed at and about how many children were impacted?
Good evening. The 5 schools that the program was implemented in: Princess Margaret, St. George Secondary, Graydon Sealy Secondary, Queen's College, and the Cojan Parish School. Approximately 730 children took part, and we have all of the scripts of all of those students. Exactly 733.
733?
733.
He needs to put the contact out of the total.
Forgive me, Troy Belgrave, Education Officer.
Minister, just for clarification, you said that you're seeking advice to ensure as we question the storage or eventual destruction of the paper. Did you mean legal advice, or is that some other form of advice? Is it legal or?
Legal is included. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you, Minister McConney. Would you like to make closing remarks?
As we close, I again wish to reiterate my great regret that this situation has happened and that students and parents and others in our school community have felt hurt by it. And I commit to you that we will continue to implement the actions which I described earlier, which I anticipate will mitigate the risk of this kind of situation occurring again. Thank you for your patience.